Zach Glass here with Video Journal number 8 for Chapter 10 of BPT 110, where I'll be discussing the financial and operational effects of COVID-19 on media. I'm going to be starting off with local newspapers. Local newspapers have been laying off employees left and right as COVID's stuck around throughout this year. They started off with sports beat writers and they worked their way to other parts of the paper. As far as sports beat writers go, there's less sports to cover. People are less engaged in sports right now for a variety of reasons, and those were the first to go. That one broke my heart. A guy that I know, he lost his job at Winston-Salem Journal, but he told me it's not just his Winston-Salem Journal, it's all the local papers from Charlotte to Raleigh, even Greensboro. They've been laying off their sports beat writers just because there's less of a demand for that content right now, and there's less content to produce in general. He landed on his feet, but these papers weren't doing great coming into COVID, and it has not helped out one bit. So hopefully they can hang on till we get out of this. I'm going to move on to local news stations like WXI 12 and WGHP, WXLV. A lot of their on-air talent have been broadcasting from their homes. There's an added cost right there to have cameras and mics and lighting and backgrounds that aren't on set anymore. They're in private homes, and that's going to cost a lot across the board nationwide. Hidden costs like that are going to just pile up as we go along. I have noticed a lot of the in-station, the talent that are actually coming into the station to shoot are the younger members. A lot of the older members of the talent, of the on-air talent, have either been furloughed or they've been let go quietly, because you don't see some of the same people you see anymore. It's a lot more youthful, younger, cheaper probably, but safer to have on set because they're less susceptible to have adverse reactions to COVID if they are exposed to COVID. The sets in general, speaking of the sets, are larger so that they can all be at the same desk still, but still be 6 feet apart. So they have to build all new sets. They have these new microphones for when they're out in public, so they can stay away from or stand back from the people that they're interviewing. They put on like the microphone, it's like a boom mic essentially. If every station in the country is having to invest in new equipment like that, that adds up. There's extra cleaning expenses obviously for all these stations. They're having to be thoroughly sanitized every day. There's less manpower in the studio in general, which means people are working harder, probably hazard pay, just tons of different financial costs that are popping up because of COVID in these local markets. So I'm going to move on to radio now. There's less listeners, obviously, because there's less commuters. And the 5 o'clock and morning commute, there's less people listening. So if I'm an advertiser, I'm not going to pay the same amount that I would have paid for those premium ad spaces before COVID. And so you just have to imagine that the radio stations are hurting because they're getting and that's what they survive on. That's literally what they survive on, and they're losing money right there. That's their bread and butter, and you got to think that they're probably hanging on by a thread right now and trying to figure out ways to make more revenue in other forms. Sports radio, Wake Forest sports radio in particular is my example. They're having to, for away games, they're not traveling with the team, so they're broadcasting from the studio or from the stadium, watching it on the big screen. They're not giving you the same quality of coverage. They don't know what's going on as quickly as they used to. They're as lost as I am sometimes when I'm watching from home, and it doesn't give me as much of a reason to tune in anymore. And that's also sports on TV, which I'll get into later. It's just not the same quality of coverage. People are turned off from sports for a variety of reasons right now. No fans in the stands, shortened seasons, players opting out, and you're just giving them more reason not to tune in whenever the quality of coverage isn't there. There's not sports beat writers there, so the post-game press conferences are a lot less in depth because there's nobody there to ask these guys questions. Plus, they're doing it on Zoom anyways, so they're not as engaged with the sports writers as they were before, and they're not prone to be engaged with them already. So just across the board, sports media is just taking a huge hit right now, and you gotta just assume that it's epidemic across the country. No pun intended, that these sports writers are barely being laid off, and there's probably more to come. Going on to TV, local or not local, cable broadcasters have had to get creative. They have let a lot of their talent start filming their own shows from the comfort of their home. So they're sending equipment out to these people, and they're giving them programming to watch and react to. TLC, Bravo, to name a couple examples. They've actually had a lot of success letting their talent film different shows from their home, or just creating new shows just for them to film from their home. And people are, they like the talent, they're going to watch it. So they've gotten creative, and I think their ratings have been great throughout all this. On the other hand, sports ratings have not. They've plummeted for a variety of reasons that I mentioned earlier. You got less or lower ratings, less ad revenue. The NBA Finals. If I wanted to advertise the NBA Finals during regular time, I'll pay whatever it takes. I'll pay whatever they ask. But if I'm going to advertise during the NBA Finals that just took place this year, you have a lot more room for negotiation because there's less people watching. People just aren't into sports right now. They have a lot more things to worry about than sports, and when you add in all those other factors I mentioned earlier, it's just not happening right now for sports media. Another show that got creative is the Great British Baking Show. Rather than having their contestants would come in on the weekends, shoot an episode, go back home and practice for the next competition the next weekend. It's a baking competition. And what they've had to do is they've had to put all 16 of the contestants up in a hotel near the studio. And those guys, as they move along, if you make it one week to the next, you're staying in that hotel another week. So that's added, and same for the crew. The crew has to stay on site too. The entire production is quarantined together. That's expensive. You got to know that. That's food. That's room and board. That's all that. They're making less money in general off that show this season, but they're still making the show. They got creative. So in general, the quality of some of these shows, they're suffering, and that's the biggest issue is the quality, and the amount of content that usually would be out there is just not the same. Almost at 8 minutes now, like I usually am, so I'm going to try to wrap it up here. I'm pretty sure I hit 3 different operational effects and 3 different financial effects. I didn't hit them in order, so hopefully that was okay. It's not a fun time to be in media right now. People are getting creative. People are doing whatever it takes to stay afloat, whether it's laying people off, whether it's furloughing older staff to bring in younger staff that's cheaper, that's cheaper to pay, whether it's bringing in less workers. And there's been new technology come out of this, I'm sure, with the microphones on the boomsticks. So people are getting creative. They're doing what they have to do to save money financially and to keep things operational. So I think if a lot of them have made it this far, hopefully we're close to the end of this thing, and everybody can make it out the other side, and we can bring a lot of these people that have lost their jobs back, and we can go back to our normal way of broadcasting, radio, TV, and news, and this can just all be one night, one bad dream. But I'm gonna let you go. I'll see you in class.